Hey guys, welcome to my brand new exterior masterclass where I'm going to be taking you step by step in creating this awesome artistic 3D exterior render for Instagram. So here's what you're going to learn in this masterclass. We will start off with the basics by setting up the camera, lighting, materials and a whole lot more. Additionally, we will also learn how to use this awesome plugin called Skatter to scatter various landscape elements on your site using its powerful new features like the composition editor, 3D bazaar, random rotation, translation, and create high quality landscape renderings. We will also be working with the latest new features in Vray 5 Update 2, such as the Chaos Cosmos materials, new Vray material features, thin wall feature, and a whole lot more. And not to mention that we will be leveraging the power of Quixel Bridge Megascans and Transmutr to add in high quality 3D materials and models into our SketchUp scene. Towards the end of the course, I will show you how to use the Vray frame buffer to have more artistic control in the post-production process. So we will do the entire post-production within the Vray frame buffer without having to use Photoshop, using Lightmix, composite and more. There's a whole lot more that you learn in this class, and most importantly, you will learn the process step by step in creating high quality visualizations using Vray and SketchUp. Now without further ado, let's jump straight to the class and create this awesome 3D artistic render. See you in the class inside. Cheers! Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'll show you how to install the plugins that we need for this course. So click on the external resource for this lecture, or you can also click on the Google Masterlink sheet which you're using for this course. Now here you find the links to all the plugins that we need for the course. So you can start off with SketchUp. So you can open SketchUp. It's a fairly simple process to download and install SketchUp. So all you need to do is select the category which you fall under. So I'm going to select 4% projects and use the 30-day SketchUp trial. So click on Start Free Trial. And then you need to sign in, and it is a fairly simple step-by-step process to download and install SketchUp. So once you download and open SketchUp for the first time, you will be asked to sign in. So you would need an active internet connection. Make sure to sign in with the same email ID that you're going to be using to register in this website, and you will get your 30-day free SketchUp trial. Next is Vray, which is similar to SketchUp. So open the Vray link, and then you can click on Try Free, which is Vray 5 for SketchUp. You can click on Start Your Trial, and then you would need to create an account or sign in to your existing account. If you are new to Vray, you will need to create your account. So add in your credentials, click on Continue. Almost there, and then click on Create Account. So they will send a link to your email, which you would then have to activate by opening your email. So open the email and click on Activate Account, and then you can sign in. And once you sign in, depending on the country you're from, you would need to further verify your account. So just add in your phone number and then click on Get Verification Code, and add in your verification code and click on Continue. And now you can select your category. If you're a student, you can select student. Make sure to send them a valid student ID and you would get a discount for your yearly subscription as well. So in my case, I'm going to select individual and then click on Start My Trial Now. So now you get a 30-day trial, and they will send an email with further information as well. So click on Download Trial, and then you would be redirected to the download page of Chaos Group. And then you can select Vray for SketchUp. Select the version that you have for SketchUp. It comes from 2015 all the way to 2021. I'm going to select 2021. And then select the latest version, which is Vray 5 Update 2. Click on Download, and then it would download to your system. So once the setup is downloaded to your system, you can open it as an administrator, or you can open it as general as well, and then follow the instructions to install it into your system. And once it's installed to your system, towards the end, it would be redirected to your Chaos license server. Just make sure that you've been installed with the same email ID that you used to register for the 30-day trial license. And if it's not the same email ID, you can click on Online Licensing, sign out, and then sign in with the same email ID. And then you would get your 30-day trial license. So once Vray is installed and you open SketchUp, it would populate with the Vray toolbars. Now, if you don't see the Vray toolbars, you can go to View, Toolbars. And when you scroll to the bottom, you would find these Vray toolbars. So make sure to just switch them on, and then it would show up here, and then simply dock them in place. Next, we can download Skatter and install Skatter and also Transmutr. So you can open the Skatter link in the Google resource sheet. You will get a trial for Skatter as well. So click on Download Trial. And then you can click here to download the installer. So that would download the RBZ file, which is around 100 MB, or you can also install it from the extension warehouse. So I'm going to open SketchUp. So to download and install Skatter from the extension warehouse, you can open SketchUp, go to extensions, click on extension warehouse, and it will generally show up in the start under featured extensions, or you can also search for Skatter. Make sure you're downloading and installing Skatter 2. So click on Skatter 2 and then click on yes, and it would install into your system. And once you install Skatter, it would show up in SketchUp, and you may have to restart SketchUp as well. And if it still doesn't show up, you can go to View, Toolbars, scroll down, and you'll find Skatter 2. So switch that on. So once you've installed Skatter and you open it up for the first time, it would ask for the license. So simply use the email ID that you used to register on the website. So once on the Skatter website, you can create an account if you haven't registered yet. So add in your credentials, click on register, and then a verification email would be sent to your mail. So open the email and click on the link to verify your account, and then click on Start 15-day trial. So now it would start the 15-day trial for your Skatter account. Once you're happy with the product, you can also go ahead and purchase the license. Next, you can download and install Transmutr, which is a standalone application and also comes as a plugin to SketchUp. So open Transmutr, click on Download Trial, and then select Windows or Mac depending on which system you use. So I'm going to select Windows, and this would come as a standalone application. So you can open the setup file, click on I agree, and go ahead with the installation process. The licensing for Transmutr would be similar to Skatter as well, and you would get a 15-day trial. Now we also use Quixel Megascans, and I have a separate video for that when we reach the Quixel Megascans part of the course. Now we can install the Artisan Tools plugin. So click on the Artisan Tools link to open it up. For Artisan Tools, we need to download it from their main website. So you can use the free 15-day trial, get trial license. Click on get 15-day trial. Click on accept and click on checkout. You also need to put in your details. You can switch off their newsletters if you don't want to receive any newsletters from them, and then click on next and then click on submit order. You'll then receive a mail with the installation instructions. So this is a mail which you receive from Artisan Tools. So you can click on the download link to download Artisan Tools first. Click on download Artisan RBZ. Go to Windows, Extension Manager, and click on install extension. And finally, we can install our Artisan Tools. So you can select DM Artisan and click on open. So this is our Artisan tool. Now to activate it, you can click on add license, add your mail, and then the license key, and click on activate license. And now you can start using the Artisan tools as well. Alright, so with these plugins installed and ready to go, we can tackle our exterior scene. So I'll see you guys next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'll show you how to use the exercise files for this section. So open the link which you will find for this course video, or you can also open the master links exercise files Google Sheet, and then click on the exercise files to open it up. So these are the files which we will be using for this section. You can either go to each of the lessons files and download the exercise files that we need for those lessons, or you can also download the zip file or the RAR file which contains all the exercise files for this section. Now you can start with the start exercise file, which is essentially the first Sketchup file for every lesson, and towards the end of the lesson is where you have the finish file, which is what happens after you go through the lesson. So you can open both of the files and see if you're progressing along with the course at the same manner, or you can go ahead and be creative and add in your own materials, models, and more. Some exercise files also come with extra files called rule of thirds and more. Now in case there are any files which are missing, you can reach out to me on the Q&A for this course or on the Facebook group, and I'll be happy to help you guys out. And if you also come across with any doubts or get stuck in any part of the course, feel free to reach out and I'll be more than happy to help and answer as soon as possible. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to use SketchUp, or rather how I use SketchUp when I work on projects, and this would also help you follow the course better because I follow the same workflow in most projects and also most of my courses as well. So the first thing what I'm going to do is switch on this large toolset bar on the left. So go to View, Toolbars, scroll down a bit, and you'll find something called the large toolset. So switch that on and you will find the common tools that we use in SketchUp on the left side of your window. And then of course we have the Vray toolbars, which I showed you in the previous video, and the other plugins which we will use in this course. Next is how I use SketchUp. So first thing is how I make groups. So the traditional way is simply to enter the group, select the faces or edges that you want to make a group, right click and click on make group. Now there's a shortcut which I use, which is actually for components, but I've changed it to make group. So what I do is make a rectangle, and if I want to make this a group, I simply double click and press G on my keyboard. So that would make groups faster. I'm cutting down 2 steps, and in the long term, I would save a lot of time as well. Next is switching to parallel projection or perspective mode. So I use the shortcut called Alt W. So this would switch to parallel projection mode. And if I switch back, if I press Alt W again, it would switch back to perspective. So what it does is, if I want to quickly go to my top view, it would help me go to my top view as well. So for the top view is Alt T and front view is Alt F. So you can see that we are in elevation mode right now. So if I press Alt W, it goes to perspective. Alt W again goes to parallel projection. So if you're wondering how to assign these shortcuts, you can go to Windows, go to Preferences, go to Shortcuts. The first shortcut which I'm going to assign is called Group. So search for Group. Now in the bottom of the list, you will find Edit Make Group. So you can see that I've assigned G. To assign, you can simply press the key here, press G and click on the plus button, and then assign the shortcut. So once you assign, press OK and you're done. So we also need to assign 3 more shortcuts. So go to Windows, Preferences, Shortcuts, and I'm going to search for Camera. So under Camera, we have Parallel Projection. So you can see that I've assigned Alt plus W. So simply click here and press Alt W and then assign the shortcut. Similarly, I also have a shortcut for the top view, which is Alt T, and the front view, which is Alt F. Now, apart from these shortcuts, the other shortcuts which I have assigned is Hide. So if I search for Hide, you can see that I have assigned F2 for hide, unhide all is F4, and unhide last is F3. There's another shortcut which is hide rest of the model. So you see view/component edit/hide rest of the model, which is J. Now I will show you how these shortcuts work as well. So let's press OK to save our shortcuts. And the parallel projection, I used to switch between these 2 modes by going to camera and then clicking on perspective or parallel projection. But since we have the shortcut, it's made life easy for us. Now coming to the hide tools. Now for example, if I want to hide this group, I can simply select this and press F2 to hide the group, press F3 to unhide all. And if I select hide this, and press F4, it would unhide all the objects in your scene. Now another cool feature which I use a lot is the hide rest of the model or toggle visibility tool, which is assigned as J. So for example, if I enter this group and I don't want to see the objects around this group when I'm editing this group, you can press J to toggle visibility. Now the problem with this model is that it is not being modeled as groups. So each of these elements are not groups, and it would be a big problem while editing them out later in case you want to make changes. But since we're doing only the exterior render for the scene, it should be fine. So that was toggle visibility. Let me just enter this group. So you can see that the rest of the model hides, but if I press J again, it would toggle visibility. Now some additional stuff which I want to show you in SketchUp is making a copy. So I use the move tool. So press M to activate the move tool, and to make a copy, you can press the control key. So now you can see that the cursor changes to a plus button. So now I just need to click and then release, click and release, and then move your object and then click again. So let me show that to you again. So with the move tool activated, press Ctrl to switch on the copy mode. Click once, release the key, move outside, and then click again to copy. As simple as that. Now if you want to make an array copy, say for example, if you want to copy this 10 times, select this object, press M, press Ctrl again to make a copy. I'm going to reference this distance. So I'm going to click from this point, release, and click on this edge. And now without touching any keys on the keyboard or clicking your mouse again, simply type in X10 and then press enter on your keyboard. So that would array copy by 10 times. Here's another cool feature. In case you changed your mind and it's not 10 times, without clicking anywhere or pressing any keys on your keyboard, simply type in the value again, which is X5 or 6, press enter. X2, enter. X15, enter. So that would update in real time, and once you're done, then press the spacebar tool or the escape key and you've arrayed copy stuff. Now another important workflow that I use a lot is locking stuff in SketchUp while moving it around. So I lock it to these axes, which is the green axis, the red axis, and the blue axis. Now to lock, we can either use the arrow keys or we can also press the shift key on your keyboard. So for example, if I want to move this along the red axis, I'm going to select this object first or this group, press M and then press Ctrl on my keyboard to activate the copy tool. I'm going to click once at the corner of this group. And now you can see that when I drag it, it's not locking to the red axis. So if I want to lock it, I'm going to press the right arrow key. So now it is locked. So even if I move my cursor to the bottom or top of the screen, it will always move along the red axis. Similarly, so let me just place this here. Similarly, if you want to lock it to the green axis, click once and press the left arrow key, and this time it would move along the green axis. Same goes for the top axis as well by pressing the top arrow key. Now if you do not want to use your arrow keys, you can also use the shift key. So press M, click once. Now once you move and your cursor is aligned along the red axis, it changes to a dot line. Now if I press shift, it would lock the dotted line and make it darker as well, which means that it's locked along the red axis. So just get into the habit of locking stuff and using the arrow keys in your keyboard to align it and move it along certain axes in SketchUp. Finally, to reference materials and to use the same material in your other objects, you can use the paint bucket tool. So press B to activate the paint bucket tool. Click here to sample the paint, which is this button here, and then select the material and apply it on your groups. That's the basic stuff in SketchUp, which I'm sure you already know. And another cool workflow that I use is the rotate tool. So if you want to rotate this object, say for example in the XY plane or the YZ plane or whatever, press Q to activate the rotate tool. And now before clicking anywhere or pressing any keys on your keyboard, press the right arrow key, so that would lock to the red axis. Press the left arrow key, that would lock to the green axis, and press the top arrow key and that would lock to the top axis. So I'm going to press the left arrow key to lock it to the green axis, and then I'm going to come click once, release, click again, release again, and then you can either type in your value. You can see in the bottom right we have an angle. So let's type in 30 and then press enter. So that would orient it along the green axis at an angle of 30. So one last tip which I would show you guys is, for example, if you want to edit some lines and move some lines around, you would need to enter the group. Now let's say I want to move this line, so I'm going to select this line. And just like how I locked stuff along an axis, you can also select the line, press the move tool, and then lock it along an axis by holding the shift key or by pressing the right arrow key. So this way, your line wouldn't go haywire and go on other planes. And if you make a copy, then it would not extend that group. So be careful when you're selecting lines and moving it. Now the best way to select this line is either by selecting this line or by making a drag selection from the top left to the bottom right. So that would select the line. But if you drag select from the bottom right to the top left, that would select the face as well, and that would move the entire group. So make sure you're always dragging from the top left to the bottom right so that it selects whatever is within that box, and then you can move it around. So that was a quick video into how I use SketchUp, and it covers most of how I would be working with SketchUp in the course as well. In case you get stuck, you can replay the videos, and you can also reach out to me in the discussions or in the doubts. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, in this video, we're going to place our 3D warehouse model and then position the camera. So go to Windows, 3D warehouse, and search for modern house. Now there are various houses. You guys can go ahead and use any model that you like. But the ones I like from 3D warehouse are the ones made from Ross. So I'm just going to open the model, click on see more details, and go to Ross's profile. I love his designs. He's from Brazil. He's got some really nice models, and you can definitely use these models to practice your rendering skills. So for this course, we're going to use the modern house, which is here, so that we can play with the landscape as well. We have a slope landscape here. So we're going to use this for the rest of the workshop. So click here, click on download, and click on yes. I'm going to place it in close to the origin. Now the first thing what you need to do is check the dimensions. So I'm going to press the tape tool or the tape measure tool. So press T to activate the tape measure tool. Click once. And when you hover on top, you can see that it's around 10 feet, which is the standard height for a room as well. So the scale seems right. And now we can start positioning our camera. Alright, so to position the camera, I'm going to use the Vray frame buffer to help me with the composition of the frame. And we're also going to be rendering this for Instagram. So we need to change the render output as well. So before I place the camera and everything, I'm just going to go to my asset editor, which is Vray. So click on the V button there, then go to settings and go to render output, and we need to change the aspect ratio. So we're going to change this from 16:9 widescreen to 1:1 square, which is perfect for Instagram. I'm also going to change the image size. So if you have a really good system, you can work with 2000 even in your interactive renders. And finally, I need to switch on save frame. So click on save frame to switch it on. Now we need to use the interactive render. Now I've mentioned this in my previous workshops as well. If you do not have the RTX graphic card, you can use the CPU graphic card, and it'll work perfectly if you're using an older system. But if you do have an RTX graphic card, use the RTX mode. If you do not have the RTX graphic card, please do not use CUDA or RTX, but stick to CPU. Now I'm going to click on RTX, click on interactive, switch on denoiser, and change this to NVIDIA AI. I'm also going to update FX to rapid so that I can see the denoiser applied as soon as the render starts. Now I'm going to go to my camera settings, open this, let's check the advanced camera parameters. This looks perfect for an exterior shot, so I'm going to leave it as is. And I'm going to save these interactive render settings out. So click on save. Call this interactive settings. And click on save. Alright, this is done. This is our first step so that we can see this black box here, which basically shows the window of what is going to be rendered in the SketchUp view. So if I switch off the save frame, you can see that that black box goes away. So always switch on the save frame and work with this mode when you are setting up your frame in SketchUp. Next, what I'm going to do is run an interactive render and then start positioning the camera. So I'm going to run an interactive render. So click on render with Vray interactive with our interactive settings applied. So this is the interactive setting with the environment light and our sunlight. So I'm just going to tile this to the right here and tile this to the left. Alright, once I've tiled it, I'm just going to drag these boxes to the side so that I can see my SketchUp view. I'm also going to temporarily close my default tray. And now I can start positioning the camera. Another quick tip which I would give is to use the rule of thirds while positioning the camera. So you can load in the rule of thirds as a background in the Vray frame buffer. So to do that, let me just drag back our layers or color correction controls. I'm going to add a background. So click on the plus button here and then click on background. And then we're going to load our EXR image. So I'm going to select the rule of thirds from our exercise files and click on open. And now it will be added to the backgrounds. We need to add it to our foreground. So just simply toggle the as foreground button on. So now you can see the rule of third lines in our image. And now we can start positioning our camera. So I'm just going to briefly position my camera like this. And I'm also going to change the field of view. So if I press Z on my keyboard, you can see that our field of view here is showing as 56. Now this is ideal for exterior renders if you want to show more of the environment. But if you want to highlight the house in your render, then I would suggest that you change the field of view to a smaller number. So you're going to try with 35 first. So I'm going to type in the value 35 with our zoom tool activated and then press enter. So now you can see that it just simply zooms into that house there. That looks fine. Maybe just add a scene for this so that we can see the differences between the various field of views. I'm going to quickly switch on my default ray and then add a scene. So this is going to be renamed as field of view 35. Or you can close the default ray again. So the idea is to sort of have negative space in our render and show objects of interest close to the intersection of the rule of third lines. So generally in rule of thirds, the objects of interest, like for example in our exteriors, we can maybe add trees or say maybe some birds, something which is closer to these intersections. And it's also a good idea to be more artistic and sort of use a lot of negative space, which can be a sky, so that you approach your render as a photographer and make each render look like it's been photographed by Ivan Ban, who is a famous architectural photographer. So think like an architectural photographer, try to work with space, light, and you will see your renders improve drastically. So this is 35. Now let's check 25. So I'm going to activate the zoom tool again. I'm going to check 25. So you can see that that zooms in a bit more. Right, that looks good. I'm also going to switch on the 2-point perspective. And maybe just orbit down a bit so that my camera is positioned such a way that it is a height of around 7 feet or 6 feet. And it's looking up to the exterior render. Let's try 20. Just type in the value and scroll out. Don't click and zoom out, but simply scroll out. Because if you click and zoom out, then the field of view might change. So type in the value and then scroll out. I'm going to switch on 2-point perspective. So I'm sort of placing the building in the middle of the scene so that the sky and the ground has equal proportion or weightage in the image. We may have to adjust it later on in the workshop once we add in our roads, but for this, it's a good start. So I'm going to add another scene. So click on add and rename this to field of view 20. So you can see that our field of view is 20. So 20 works well, sort of an elevation kind of render. You can work with other field of views as well. For example, 35, you'll see more of the environment. This works well as well, but I'm going to be sticking with the field of view of 20. Alright, I positioned the camera to my liking and to my artistic taste. In the next video, we're going to tweak the exterior lighting. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. Now before we start with this video, I always make it a point of saving my renders to the history VFP, which helps me to track the progress of the renders as well. So I'm going to stop the interactive render. I'm going to maximize this. And I'm going to drag this window to the right. Now if you don't see this window, you can go to Options, VFP Settings, go to History, and then enable your history VFP. Click on Load. Create a folder called VFP, and then click on Select Folder. Once you specified the folder, you can click on Save and Close. Now what I'll do is simply add this to the history VFP. And this would get added to the history VFP. Now you can see that we have some dark patches here. This might be a bug from Vray, which Chaos Group will go ahead and fix in the future versions. Otherwise, if you double click on the render here, it will show up in the main window of your history VFP. Alright, so now we're going to start tweaking the lights. So the first thing what I'm going to do is, I'm going to add some color correction controls before tweaking the camera and also adding HDRI into our scene. So I'm going to drag this to the left here. And now we have some default color corrections. And in the latest version, which is Vray 5 Update 2, they've added something called the Sharpen Blur. So you can enable this by clicking on Calculate Sharpen Blur. And this would enable it for your scene. And then you can start increasing the sharpening amount for your render within the Vray frame buffer. So you don't need to use Photoshop at all. because the latest versions of Vray has everything packed into it. So I'm going to sort of reduce the sharpness because we don't need too much of sharpness in our scene. And now the first thing which I'm going to add is called an exposure. So I'm going to add the exposure layer. I'm going to increase the exposure a bit. Now, as soon as you increase the exposure, you can see that we have some burnt out areas. So to fix this, we can simply reduce the highlight burns, and that would fix the overexposed burnt out areas in our renders as well. You can increase the contrast a bit. Very subtle values, not too much. And now I can add a curve as well. So I'm going to add a curve. And I'm going to click on the bottom left and drag this to the bottom here. Click on the top right and drag this to the top here. What happens is it boosts the highlights here. So this would sort of boost the highlights in your scene. And by clicking at the bottom and dragging it to the bottom, this would boost the shadows in your scene. So this would add that extra oomph or depth in your render. So if you can see, if I switch this on, it fixes a washed out image and makes it look much better. So an S curve is what you have to go for in any render. You can also tweak the individual RGB values, but I generally stick to the master and make an S curve. Next, I'm going to add a white balance. So click on white balance, and you can either make it warm or cool. So let's make it slightly cool. And finally, I'm going to also add a filmic tone map, which would add that extra boost in your image. And if it's a little too much, you can reduce the values here. Now, if you don't see the dialer, you just need to drag this to the left and you can see the dialers here. And simply click on the dialer and reduce the value to have a less effect on the image. And now if I switch this off, you can see that slight touch in your render. Alright, so I've placed my color corrections. I'm going to click on save here to save these color corrections out. And I'm going to call this the initial color correction. And click on save. So sometimes as you are working with the project, these settings may get lost. So you can simply click on load and then load the VFBL file. So if you open, this will show up here. You can also add these display corrections or layers to something called a presets folder. So which is here. So if you click here, you can see that a presets folder is not specified. So we can specify a presets folder. So go to options, VFB settings, click on layers and click on open. Now open presets. Now create a folder called presets. Open it up and click on select folder and click on save and close. Now I can save these settings again to that presets folder. So click on save. Go to your presets folder. Call this initial color correction and click on save. So now what happens is if I click here, you can see that this VFBL color correction file shows up. And we can use this in our future projects as well. So in the long term, you will save a lot of time and you do not have to keep adding these layers over and over again. Alright, so that was a quick video into the Vray frame buffer and how to add layers in the Vray frame buffer. In the next video, we will start tweaking our lights and adding some HDRIs, and I will show you the multiple HDRI cool new feature which comes with Vray 5 update 2. I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. Now in this video, we're going to add some HDRIs in our scene and use the HDRIs to lighten our exterior scene. So in the new version of Vray, which is Vray 5 update 2, they've added something called multiple HDRIs. So you can use multiple HDRIs and see how it lights up your scene. So before I add my HDRIs, I'm going to disable the environment light and maybe also the sunlight and use the sunlight later in the course. So let's open Asset Editor, go to settings, go to environment and switch it off. You can use your HDRIs in the environment texture slot as well. But I prefer using the dome light because it has the adaptive feature which helps in lighting up our scenes better. I can also go to my lights, go to sunlight, open this up and switch off the sunlight as well. Now let's close this and now let's start placing our dome light. So I'm going to click on the dome light button, which is part of our lights in the Vray toolbar. So click on dome light and place it in the scene. So that's one. We can place two more dome lights. So click on dome light again and place it in the scene. And let's place another dome light. So click again and place it in the scene. It doesn't matter where you place your dome light because it's going to envelope your scene. What it does is it works as a dome in your scene and envelopes the entire scene with a 360-degree HDRI panoramic image. So I'm going to move these dome lights to the side a bit. And I'm going to start loading in my HDRI into these dome lights. So let's open Chaos Cosmos. You can also go to HDRI Haven and download the HDRIs that work for you. But Chaos Cosmos HDRIs work equally well as well. So open Chaos Cosmos. You do need an active internet connection to use Chaos Cosmos. And I would suggest to keep the internet on either ways. So open this. There's a new category called materials with the new version, which we will use later on in the course. First thing what we need to do is add some HDRIs. So go to HDRIs. So let's add in some day HDRIs. So click on day. So maybe I could add day 34. So download the HDRI and then load it in. Let's go to evening. You can use a mix of day and evening. So let's load in sunset 5. So you can see that these are hemisphere HDRIs. Sphere HDRIs would include the ground as well, but in this case, the HDRI comes only with the sky. So maybe I'm going to use Sun 38. So click on Sun 38 and load that in as well. Now you can go ahead and use any HDRI which works for you. You can check the background, open it, check the background and see which works for you. This looks cool as well. Now if I'm not happy with HDRI, I'll come back and reload another HDRI. So we loaded in 3 HDRIs and it will show up in our asset editor. So let's close Chaos Cosmos. Let's open asset editor and click on textures here. So you can see that we have day 34, sun 38 and sunset 5. So we're going to copy this to our dome light bitmap slots. So I'm going to right click on day 34 and click on copy. And then I'm going to go to lights, click on dome light. And then I'm going to paste this as an instance. So if I paste it as an instance, if I change the values under environment, it would change here as well. So I'm going to paste it as instance. Since it's a hemisphere, we can leave it as hemisphere, but I have an OCD of changing this shape to sphere. So I'm going to change it to sphere. And I'm going to do the same for the rest as well. So I'm going to go textures, go to Sun 38, copy this. I'm also going to rename the lights. So this was day 34, rename. Call this day 34. This is Sun 38. Let's paste the light first. So click on Dome Light 1. Right click here and click on Paste as an instance. And change this to Sphere as well. And rename this to Sun 38. So right click, rename Sun 38. And finally we have Sunset 005. So copy this. Click on Dome Light number 2 and paste it in place. Paste it as instance. And rename this as well. Sunset 005. Doesn't read 005, Sunset 05. Alright, and also make sure to change the shape to sphere. You can see that makes some amount of difference. Let's stay on the safe side and use the shape as sphere. We can leave the rest of the settings as is, and we can change the direction of the HDRI by entering the texture slot, which I will show you in the history VFP. Alright, so I've placed 3 lights. I've switched off the environment light and the sunlight as well. And we're going to play with 3 HDRIs. Now to play with these HDRI lights, I need to use something called a Lightmix. So we're going to add the Lightmix in. So under Render Elements, you can click on Render Elements. And then add in the Lightmix. So click on Lightmix. And that would add in your Lightmix. And now we can use this to tweak our lights for our exterior scene. So let's go to settings, check the interactive render settings. Now before I render, I always click on the scene. So click on field of view 20 and then click on render with Vray Interactive. Alright, so we have our HDRI added and you can see that it's had quite an impact in our scene. Now we can tweak the light settings by clicking on the source Lightmix and then switching off all the lights. So that would make it dark because obviously there's no light in our scene. So let's start with day 34. So click on day 34. So this is day 34. Now you can reduce the value of day 34. That would make it darker obviously. And this way you can mix it with the other HDRI as well. So if I switch on Sun 38, you can see that that adds an impact on your scene. And I can reduce or increase the impact of Sun 38. And finally, if I switch on Sun 05, you can see that that has an impact on the scene as well and makes the ground brighter. So you can either reduce it or increase the value. This is mixing all the HDRIs together with day 34 as the background. Now if you want to change the color of your light, you can do that as well. So if I click here, you can either make the light warmer. You can see that it sort of has that warm effect on your scene. So this would make the entire scene look too warm. So let's keep it at a normal value. And now you can see that if I switch off my HDRIs or just switch off all the lights and switch the first light on, you can see that this is our background. Now if I switch on the second HDRI, you can see that that overlaps with the first HDRI. And finally, if I switch on the last one, you can see that the day HDRI blends with the evening HDRI as well. So the day HDRI seems a bit too strong, so I can sort of reduce this. Maybe keep it at 0.02 just to make it a little brighter. And that works well in our scene. The clouds come from Sunset 05 and Sun 38 as well. The day HDRI also has few clouds. So does the Sun 38 and the Sunset 05 as well. So we've sort of mixed the HDRIs together and we have this nice cool background. Now if you want to rotate the HDRI and see a different background, you can do that as well. So you'll have to start the interactive render and open your asset editor. Now you need to select the dome light from the light settings and open the HDRI texture slot. And under texture placement, you have the type and mapping. So make sure to select environment. It will be default as environment and make sure the mapping is spherical. So when you select spherical, it might change the lighting a bit. But if you want to change the position of the HDRI in your render, all you need to do is rotate the H values. So click here to rotate the H value and then you can see the background change as well. So you can do it for all the dome lights or either one of the dome lights as well. So let's try for all the dome lights and see what kind of an effect we get. Make sure your use transform is switched off or the background wouldn't change. So make sure use transform is switched off and then open the texture slot and rotate the texture here. Let's see what kind of an effect it has on the scene. All right. Maybe let's try a positive value. It's simply rotating the dome by this amount and giving a different effect in the scene. All right. And finally, let's try Sunset 05. Switch off use transform. It would be turned off as default. And then change your mapping to spherical and change the value here. So you can see that that changes the background dramatically. So that's how you can change the values and see which lighting works for you. And then use those till the end of the scene. But I'm going to stick to 0 because I like the initial lighting. So let me just go back to these dome lights and make them all 0. And use this as our background for the rest of the course. So this is how you blend dome lights using the Lightmix. And it's also a good idea to save these Lightmix settings out. So click on save and call this lighting with multiple HDRI. Now, in case you lose the settings, you can simply click on load and load in that Lightmix setting. So that was a quick tutorial into using multiple HDRIs in Vray 5 for SketchUp. In the next video, I'll show you how to use Lightgen, which is a new feature in Vray 5, to simulate multiple lighting scenarios. See you guys next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the Lightgen to generate different exterior lighting scenarios in your scene. So let's open the asset editor and check the lights. So as you can see, we have our 3 HDRIs. So we're going to use the Lightgen to mix and match these HDRIs and generate different HDRI lighting scenarios for our scene. So to start the Lightgen, you can click on the Lightgen button here. It comes with Vray 5, which is the latest version. This is an exterior scene, so I'm going to select exterior. And then I'm going to select HDR. Now you can also use your custom HDR set. So you can simply tick this on and load a folder which contains all the custom HDRIs. But I'm going to use the Chaos Cosmos HDRI. So I'm going to take that off. Now you can see that with the default settings, it is going to generate around 140 variants. I don't need that many variants. So I'm going to reduce the number of unique styles, which is the number of present HDRs. And I'm going to increase the variation, which is basically the rotation of the HDR. And I'm going to keep the seed value around 6, which is the random variation for each HDR. We can also increase the size of the thumbnails, but 160 should suffice. And then click on Generate 70 Variants. So now it will go ahead, combine those HDRs and start to generate different lighting scenarios for your scene. Alright, so as you can see, we've generated different lighting scenarios for our scene. And now we can use any of these in the Vray frame buffer as well. So before I do that, I'm going to save this out. Also, please note that disable lights on application is turned on default, which basically means that any artificial lights in your scene won't be calculated in the Lightgen. Lightgen will only calculate either your dome light or the Vray sun and sky. Now to use any of these Lightgen setups in your Vray frame buffer, first you need to run the interactive render. So I'm going to run the interactive render. So you can see that the Vray frame buffer is dark. So we need to start applying our Lightgen lights into the Vray frame buffer. So all you need to do is just open the Lightgen window and then simply click on the Lightgen variant that you like and it would load it in. Now if it still doesn't load in, you'll have to check your Lightmix settings. So let's go to source Lightmix. So you can see that we have this Lightgen dome. You need to simply switch this on. So now you can apply any of these lighting scenarios in your scene. So if I click on this, you can see that updates as I click on any of the variants in our Lightgens. So this way you do not have to tweak the HDRI lights. And you can play with various lighting scenarios simply by using the Lightgen feature in Vray 5. You can also add this to the history VFB. So if I add this here, it would show up on your history VFB, and then you can go ahead and add some other lights as well. Maybe we could try this and then add this to the history VFB. And then we can do a before and after. So now you can see the difference between those two lights. So I'm liking this light for this scene. So I'm going to be using this for the rest of the workshop. So I'm going to stop the render. And whichever is the latest that you've clicked on, that would be applied to your Lightgen Dome 0. So if I switch this off, you can see that the light goes away. And you can also reduce the impact that has in your scene. So let's keep it at 1 and it works perfect for our scene. Now if you want to save these Lightgen set out and use it in another project, you can click on save and then save it out here. And the next time when you open Lightgen, so let me just close this and click on Lightgen or click on reset. And then if you click on load, you can load in the Lightgen set. So this comes with the variants from this project. Alright, so I'm going to be using this for the rest of the workshop. In the next video, I'm going to modify the terrain, add some roads and more before I start adding the materials. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to modify the terrain a bit and also add the roads and more. So to modify the terrain, I'm going to use a plugin called Artisan Tools, which is super useful when it comes to terrain modeling in SketchUp. So I'm going to go to View, Toolbars, and switch on the Artisan toolset and click on Close. Alright, to start off, I'm going to enter this group. You can see the entire group is exploded and the terrain is not a separate group. So I'm going to double click this face, hold Control on my keyboard and double click on this face. And then I'm going to make this a group. So I'm going to press G to make it a group. So now if I enter and press J, it is separate from our house model. So now you can see that if I click on FOV20, this doesn't seem realistic. So what I will do is sort of bring this down, and I'm going to use the Artisan tools. So before I do that, I'm just going to delete this side of the terrain. So I'm going to double click again here and select that entire face. To select that entire face, press G and then click on delete. Alright, now what I'll do is enter this group and I'm going to start using the Artisan tools. So before I use the Artisan tools, if I triple click, you can see that this face is subdivided, but it is not subdivided to an extent that will allow me to modify the terrain. So I will need to subdivide it further. So what you can do is select all the faces and then click on the subdivide selection button. So if I click on subdivide, you can see that it starts to subdivide the face. I'm going to subdivide it again. Click once more. The more number of times you click, the longer it takes to subdivide the face as well, because it has to calculate all these edges. Let's see if we can work with this. This seems to work fine. Alright. So now we can use the Artisan tools to modify this. The first thing what I need to do is sort of move this edge to the side and then bring it down. So I'm going to go to my top view. So Alt W, Alt T. So this is my top view. I'm also going to make a scene out of it. So let's go to Scenes here and click on the plus button to create a scene and rename this to the top view. Alright. And then what I'll do is I click on this vertex select tool. So click on vertex select. So these are various vertices in our model. So now what I have to do is simply drag a selection from the top left to the bottom right, and this would make a selection of the vertices. You can also switch on hidden geometry. So go to view, click on hidden geometry to see the edges of our terrain or contour. And now what I can do is click on the vertex move and then simply move this to the right. So you can see that it snaps and you can move it to the right. Just going to move it this way. Alright, that looks good. And then what I'm going to do is modify this terrain. So let me just select this again. You can see that it is subdivided. So let's see if we can work with this. If we are unable to work with this subdivision, we'll have to subdivide it even more. So we're going to use the sculpt brush tool. So click on sculpt brush. So that would enable the sculpt brush tool. Now if you click on the arrow keys, let's say the left or the right arrow keys. So if I click on the left arrow key, I can make the brush size bigger. Same goes for the right arrow key as well. And if I hold the top arrow key on my keyboard, I can change the orientation to either push or pull to create depressions in our terrain or to inflate the terrain as well. So in this case, I will need to bring it down. So I'm going to bring it down like that. Reduce the size. And then start clicking to bring this terrain down. So you can see that sort of starts to bring the terrain down. So the Artisan tools is amazing when it comes to sculpting in SketchUp. It gives you more artistic freedom. You can also press Ctrl Z in case you didn't like some parts where, for example, here I've given it a little too much. So let me just bring it down that way. So let me just bring these down. You can also right click and switch to the smooth brush tool and then start smoothing it out. It's better to change the orientation while smoothing it out. Alright, I'm going to change it back to sculpt. So let's right click, click on sculpt. I'm going to change Change it to the down arrow to create depressions. Also, we're going to increase the size. Right? And I'm also going to reduce the intensity. I'm going to reduce the intensity of the depression. So the more longer your arrow is, the greater the intensity. So you can see that that's more intense. So I'm going to reduce it. Just keep it close to the circle around that. And now I can slowly start sculpting it down. I can also use the move vertex tool. So if I click on the select vertices, I can maybe select this part and then click on the vertex move and then simply move this down along the blue axis. That also works. And then you can switch back to the sculpt tool and then start sculpting it down. You do not have to worry too much about these extra edges. We can then use the smooth tool to sort of fix that. So right click on smooth, change the arrow to top. I'm going to change it to the top arrow and sort of smoothen it out. Reduce the size of the arrow as well. Let's go back to the sculpt tool and move this down. Let's also delete this back face here because I don't need that. So I'm going to double click on the back face, make it a group and delete. And now it's easier for me to edit these vertices. So let's go back to the top view, enter this group, click on vertex select and select these edges. And then click on the vertex move and bring it down. I can do it for the entire line as well. So let's go back to the top view. Select the vertex again. Maybe just deselect these vertices and only use these. And also select these vertices here. And then click on the move vertex tool. Click on any edge and then move it down. So there is no option to lock it to the blue axis. So you will need to hover along the blue line and then bring it down. Alright, that looks good. Now let's go back to our sculpt brush tool and then start sculpting this. Here's another trick. Now in case you're happy with the edges and you don't really want the edges to expand anymore, you can use the crease edge tool. So I'm going to select the face, hold Ctrl Shift to deselect the face and only select the edges. So double click on the face, Ctrl Shift and select the face again to only select the edges. And then go to Tools, Artisan, Crease Selection and change the scope to edges and vertices and click on OK. So this would crease the edges. And now when I start to sculpt on the edge, let's enter the group first. Alright, and then sculpt brush. Now if you notice that if I use the sculpt tool and then start sculpting this here, it wouldn't affect the edges and it would always be within the boundary. So I'm going to click on smooth and then simply smoothen this out. So it is a trial and error using the Artisan tools, but it gives you good creative capabilities and it will help you create your terrain faster as well. It works best with topographic lines. Now since this model came with our existing terrain, we were able to use the Artisan tools to exercise working with existing terrains as well. Alright, that looks decent. Let's go back to front view. And now you can see that we have a slope kind of a terrain, which looks perfect for our scene. Now we can add our roads as well. So I'm going to add a footpath first. So it's a simple rectangle for both the road and the footpath. So I'm going to snap it to the blue axis. So press the top arrow key, click once on the edge, and drag it out. Now you can see in the bottom right, it's given the dimensions 111 feet by 8 feet. If I want exact 8 feet as the width, I'm just going to type in comma and then type in 8 feet and then press enter. So that's an 8 feet wide footpath. Going to make this a group, enter the group and give a thickness of around 4 inches. Now for the road, I'm just going to copy this to the bottom here and then extend it out to make our road. So now if I go back to front view, we have our road, footpath and the terrain as well. So I hope you guys found this video useful. Do go ahead and use the Artisan tools to create the terrain and to smooth out and sculpt out your favorite contours as well. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to add some materials into our scene using the Chaos Cosmos material library, which is part of the newest update, which is Vray 5 update 2. Alright, so I'm going to open Chaos Cosmos and maximize this. And now if I go to my materials, you can see that we have various materials which are high quality, comes with displacement maps, normal maps, reflection glossiness maps and a whole lot more. So we're going to start off with the wall. So click on walls. So we have plaster white, wall stucco white, plaster irregular. So I'm going to use plaster white. So click on download and it would start downloading the material into your scene. You can also go to concrete and use any of these concrete materials as well. It's got concrete panel, which is super useful because most of the exteriors these days use concrete panels. So I'm going to go back to wall and use the plaster white. So once you download it, you can click on import. So this would import it into your asset editor under the name of plaster white. So let's open our asset editor. Let's go to materials and at the bottom you can see we have plaster white. So we can now apply this material on our wall. So I'm going to close this, zoom in, enter the group and press B to activate the bucket tool. So you can see that the active material is plaster white 0-170 centimeters. So I'm going to apply this. I'm going to apply this here as well. Here, and on this side as well. So wherever the material is showing up in the render is where I will apply the material. And also I need to check the size. So I'm going to check the size here. So it is 70 centimeters, which is 2 feet 3 inches. So even if I type the 70 centimeter value here, you can see that it comes as 2 feet 3 inches. So the best part about Chaos Cosmos materials is that if you are modeling in the right scale, it will be added in the right scale as well, which is 70 centimeters. Now let's add some additional materials. So I'm going to change the stone here. So let's go back to Chaos Cosmos. So let's go to stone. You can use any material here. You can use sandstone or even the rock orange here. Let me see if there's any other material. Let's go to bricks. So I'm going to use the brick wall material, which is white, brick wall white. So I'm going to download and load this in. And then I'm going to go to my asset editor, select brick wall white, and then start applying it on our face. So enter the group, select the face, use the bucket tool and apply the material. So this material also comes in the right scale. I'm also going to apply it on our pillars here. You do not have to worry about applying it everywhere since we're just creating just one render for this workshop. You can go ahead and apply the material everywhere in case you want to create multiple renders of the same model, but in our case it's going to create one render for now. Alright, let's go back. You can also add a ground material. So we have grass tree with roots, asphalt gray is for the road. So you can apply these materials for the road as well. I'm going to use some simple grass material, so maybe this material, so load this in. So this is grass 39 by 150 centimeters. I need to apply this for the terrain, so enter the terrain group, select the grass material. You can right click here and click on apply to selection. And it will apply on the grass as well. Alright, so you applied our basic materials. So let's go back to field of view. And then click on render with Vray Interactive. Alright, this looks good. Our grass is looking good as well. And I'm going to add this to our scene. So click on add. And it will get added to our history VFB. So now if I do a before and after, so this is A and this is B, you can see how much of a difference the grass and the materials make in your scene. Alright, stop the render, close this. You guys can go ahead and add the remaining materials as well. For example, the road, the curbs, the sidewalk, maybe this pathway here. You can play around with your creative abilities and change the materials as well. Now, if there are some materials which are missing in the Chaos Cosmos library and you want to add it from Megascans, I will show it to you in the next video. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Alright, so before we proceed to the future tutorial, I'm going to show you how to install Quixel Megascans because we're going to use some assets and materials from Megascans library. So you need to search for Quixel Megascans and then click on Quixel Megascans to open it up. And then you need to click on subscribe to create a new account. Click on begin for free. Add in all your details and then sign in with your Epic Games account. So I'm going to sign in. So once you sign in to Quixel, you get an option to download the Quixel Megascans software, also known as Quixel Bridge. So click on Bridge to open it up and click on Download Bridge. So once it's downloaded, you can open the setup and then go ahead with the installation instructions. I would suggest that you download and install the setup in another directory so that your C drive is always free with a lot of space. So I already have Quixel Bridge installed, so I'm going to open it up. So this is Quixel Bridge and it comes with a lot of awesome assets and materials which a lot of 3D artists are using now and are able to create amazing renders with. And now because of Transmutr, you can bring these Megascan assets into SketchUp. So I'm going to show you how to connect Quixel with Transmutr. So you can just click on any material here and it shows up here on the right with the various options. Now what I'm going to do is next to 2K resolution, we have the settings button. So click on that and click on export settings. Now in your export target, it would be defaulted to Unreal Engine. Just scroll down and click on custom socket export. Now you need to copy the socket port from your Transmutr and paste it here. So I'm going to open Transmutr, which also comes as a standalone application and also as a plugin in SketchUp. So open Transmutr, go to settings, and then when you scroll down, you'll find a Megascans Bridge socket port. So copy this and then paste it here and go back. So once you pasted it and you want to bring a certain model into Transmutr, all you need to do is click on download. It will download the model and then you can export. So once you click on export, it shows export successfully and it shows up in your Transmutr. Now Transmutr helps convert your OBJ 3ds Max files into .sketchup files and they give you options as well. So what I do generally is simplify the mesh so that the object is not too heavy. So I'm going to drag the slider to the right a bit to around 77%. Check the materials as well. The materials come with the Megascans library. And then I simply click on Transmute. So once you click on Transmute, you get an option to save this SketchUp file. I generally save it in the download folder of Quixel Bridge. In case you want to locate this download folder, simply go to Quixel Bridge, click here and click on Go to Files. So now you know the location of where your Quixel Bridge assets are located in your system as well. So in this case, it's located here. Now if I want to use the same location, here's a quick hack which you can do, which I learned in my previous company. Simply click here, copy this directory or location, go back to your Transmutr, click on Transmute, and then paste the location here. So I'm going to paste it and press enter. So you can see that it's come to the correct location and then simply click on save. So it's transmuted the object, and if I open SketchUp now and paste that directory, you can see that we have a SketchUp file. Open it up and you can see that we have our object here as well. And these are ready to render models which you can directly place in your SketchUp scenes. So we will be placing some pavers, some side road curbs, and a whole lot more from Quixel Megascans. So in the next video, we will be adding some models and more into our scene. I'll see you guys next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'll show you how to add materials from our Quixel Bridge or Megascans library. So I'm going to open Quixel Bridge first. We're going to add some materials like the road, the footpath and more. So let's go to the home and click on surfaces. And now we have something called asphalt. So let's click on asphalt. So here we have different materials for our road. I'm going to use this fine American road because it comes with a side marking and also the median marking. So you can click on download by clicking on the green button once you sign in with your Epic Games account. Also, if you're noticing that you will have to purchase the Megascans library, you will need to download Unreal Engine first because Megascans comes free with Unreal Engine. So I'm going to click on download and open this asset. So click on the asset, open it up. And once you click on download, we can open the bitmap files for this materials. So click on these three buttons here and click on go to files. So this is the folder which has the materials. So I'm going to copy the location of this folder and start adding in these materials to our Vray Asset Editor. So let's open Vray. Let's create a generic material. Rename this. Call this road. Fine. And let's start adding in our bitmaps. So click on the texture slot, click on bitmap. Paste in the location of your files. And start adding in our bitmap. So the diffuse texture slot is always the albedo bitmap. As you can see the image as well. So click on open. And go back. Then let's add a reflection. So let's click here, go to bitmap. We can use ambient occlusion for our reflection. So click on that and open. And go back again. So that would make it super reflective. So in that case, we need to add some roughness map. So the roughness can be used by changing the surface control to use roughness. And then adding a appropriate bitmap in our reflection roughness slot. So in this case, it's going to be the roughness map here. Click on open. And change this to rendering space linear as well. Now let's go back. All right, that looks good. Let's add a bump. So change this to normal map because we have a normal map in our folder. So go to bitmap and select the normal map here. Click on open and change this to rendering space linear. And finally, you can add a displacement map as well. So click on the add attribute and click on displacement. Switch the displacement on. Change this to 2D displacement and load in your texture slot. So I'm going to use the 2K displacement map. Click on open. Change this to rendering space linear. Go back and also increase the amount to 2. Alright, so we've added all our bitmaps to our road material. Now we can apply the road material to our scene. So close the asset editor, enter this group, select the face, use the bucket tool and then apply the material. So obviously the scale is small, so we need to adjust this. So right click, click on texture, click on position and only use the green pen to increase the size. So I'm going to rotate it as well. So I'm using only the green pen and it snaps to 90 and the other axes as well. All right, make it slightly bigger. It's a little too big. Going to place this line close to the footpath. Right click and click on done. And that is not the footpath, so I need to adjust it again. Yeah, this is the footpath here. Right click done. Right, that looks good. Now if I go back to front view, you can see the dark road here. Now if you want to see more of the road, you can also zoom out of the scene a bit. So if I zoom out, you can see that we have more of the road now. But I will adjust that later in case the road isn't showing up as much. Next is the footpath here. So let's open Quixel Megascans again. Also, after you've applied the road and you want to use this in your future projects, you can go to your asset editor, click here. And I've created a material library called the Vray Exterior Material Library. So this is simply a folder which contains subfolders. So if I open this, you can see that this is our Vray Exterior Material Library, which is simply a folder. And under this main folder, I have subfolders, for example, background, roads, sidewalks. So I can create other folders as well. Maybe, for example, bricks. And then make sure you don't open the subfolder, but the main folder. So click on select folder. And that would load in your custom material library. And once you loaded in material library, you can click on, for example, roads. So this would show the material here. And if you want to add this in, you can, firstly, let me just rename this, call this new. And if I add this in, it would get added to the material library. And when you're working with a new project, all you need to do is simply drag this to your material list here and start using it in your project. Since this is the same material, I'm going to delete this and just use the new material that we created. Similarly, I've also created some additional materials, for example, a sidewalk. So if I drag this in, so this is another material which I took from Quixel Megascans, which you can also find by searching for those materials, for example, sidewalk, and then click on surfaces. You can see that we have stone and then floor and then different floorings that we can use for our sidewalk. So they have a lot of materials and it takes time to sort them out. So each time you download a material, it's always a good idea to add it to your custom material library. So I'm going to add this to my footpath. So I'm going to enter this group and then apply the material. And I'm also going to change the scale. So let's say 4 feet or maybe even 8 feet. Yeah, that looks fine. Perfect actually. Because this is an 8 feet wide footpath. Alright, so our scene is coming to life. Let me just run an interactive render. And then add this to our H3VFP. In the next video, I'll show you how to use Transmutr to bring in Megascan models, 3D models, along with its materials. So in this way, I can add the roadside curves and other models into our scene, which is not available in Kiosk Cosmos or 3D Warehouse. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to add some Megascan assets into our scene using this awesome plugin called Transmutr. First thing what you need to do is open Transmutr. So you can open the standalone application or you can open the plugin as well. Now if I go to settings, in the bottom you can see that we have something called the Megascans bridge socket port. So this is 24981 in my case. So copy this and then open Quixel Megascans. So now we can load in any of our models. So I've said a roadside curb. So you can also search for curb here or curbs. You can search for a curb here and then either select any of the curbs or you can also select a footpath and add it to your scene. So I'm just going to add some curb which works for our scene. So I'm going to use the street curb and then click on download, and once it's downloaded you can export this to Transmutr. So to export this you need to change the settings first. So click on the settings here and click on export settings and then change it from the default of Unreal Engine to something called custom socket export. So click on custom socket export, paste the socket number which you got from Transmutr and then simply go back. Once you've done that, you can click on export and then it would show up in Transmutr. So you can see that it shows up in Transmutr. And now I can save this out. So before I save it out, I'm going to simplify the mesh so that it's not a heavy model. So you can use the mesh simplification feature on Transmutr. I'm going to drag this to the right here a bit. Alright, that looks good. And then click on Transmute. Now it's always a good idea to save these SketchUp files to the same folder which contains the materials as well. So if you want to find the folder location, you can go back to Quixel Bridge. Then click here and click on Go to Files. So this is our folder location. So copy this. Click on Transmute again. Then paste the location here. And then save it out. So I've already saved this SketchUp file, so I can use the same file in our scene as well. So once you save it out, you can then import it into SketchUp by going to File, click on Import, paste the location, select the file and click on Import. You can also drag and drop the file and then place it in place. You can see that we've placed our nice looking curve and now we need to simply move it so that it's in line with this. Maybe we can also scale it out a bit, exactly 4 feet. I'll select this, let's go to top view and then copy it from this edge to about this edge and then multiply it by 10. Alright, that looks good. And I can also copy this, deselect the dome light and copy it to this side. Make sure to copy by pressing the Ctrl key and place it this side as well. Alright, perfect. So we placed our roadside curb. Now if I select the material for this, so I go to my bucket tool, select this material and go to our asset editor, you can see that it comes in with all the maps. The bump map, the displacement map, and the correct values as well. So this is why I like using Megascan materials, because Transmutr brings them in with the right values as well. Also, I'm going to just enter this group and bring the thickness of the footpath down. And finally, I'm going to make this entire thing a group. So let's go to top view. Select the entire road curb. Deselect the dome lights. Then make it a group. So now I can select this. Select the road. And move it up a bit. And that should be fine for our scene. So let's go back to front view. And that looks good. So now if I run an interactive render, you can see our awesome looking roadside curb. It's also a good idea to move that white line out a bit, or it looks fine. All right. Maybe just move it out a little bit. Okay. All right. Looks good. Awesome. So similarly, you guys can go ahead and add in multiple assets. So if I go to home, click on 3D assets, we have buildings, beams, combined, door, pillar, walls as well. A lot of cool assets which you can add to your scene. You also have interior assets. So these are generally used in games, but you can also use it for your architecture and interior scenes. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of assets you guys bring in into SketchUp and also create amazing artistic creative renders. Alright, so that was a quick tutorial into using Megascan assets in SketchUp. In the next video, I'll show you the easier way to add Entourage or 3D models into our scene using Chaos Cosmos. I'll see you guys next video. Cheers. Hey guys, in this video, I'll show you how to use this awesome plugin called Skatter to scatter elements along our terrain. Alright, so in the previous video, we added some assets from Chaos Cosmos under flower, grass, and rocks. So you guys can go ahead and add these assets in case you have not added them yet. So it would show up here on the right here, or you can use the previous exercise file as well. So now we need to add some grass and scatter these assets along this terrain. So the first thing what I'm going to do is add the grass. So I'm going to open 3D Bazaar. So click on 3D Bazaar. Make sure you have an active internet connection as well. So with Skatter, you get 3D Bazaar and Composition Editor. And in the 3D Bazaar, we have some free assets. So I'm going to use something called the Scatter Tall Grass. So click on download. And once you download, you'll have an option to import this. Make sure to import this as a proxy. Use Scatter Grass Tall and then click on import. So now it would import into Skatter Composition Editor and also create a composition called Skatter Tall Grass. So let me close this other assets. So we've added the scattered object, which is the Scatter Grass Tall. So now we need to select the host. So before we select the host, we need to make sure this terrain group is not inside any other group. So I'm going to switch to the select tool and then try to select the terrain. So you can see that it is inside the main house groups. So we need to move this out of the main house group. So what we can do is select this group, press Ctrl X to cut it. And then we're still inside the main group. So press Escape to exit. And now we're outside. Now go to Edit and click on Paste in Place. So now we know that this group is outside. So click on Pick Surface and then select the group. So now you can see that the grass being scattered. So now we have different options. What I'll do is increase the density. So I see more grass and then click on Generate. Now there's two modes to generate the grass. You can either generate in render only mode, or you can generate it as a grass in the model. So if I switch this off and click on Generate, now you can see that it comes as a proxy, which will be added to your scene. I don't really need this because I will be seeing the grass only in the render. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z, switch to only render only mode and then click on Generate. Alright, great. So now let's see how this grass looks in the render. So let's go to field of view, 20, and then click on render with Vray Interactive. Alright, so now you can see our grass and it's looking great, but you can see that some patches are still left out, especially at the borders. So we need to fix that. So let's stop the render and let's add this to our S3 VFB as well. Close this. And now we need to add another scattered object called the scatter border. So you can close the composition editor, open the 3D bazaar, scroll down, select scatter tall grass again, and change this option from scatter grass tall to scatter grass tall border. Use the default proxy and then click on import. So this would be added to another composition. So if I open composition editor, you can see that we have two compositions now. We have the scatter tall grass and we have the scatter tall grass border. So similarly to the scatter tall grass, for this composition, we need to add the host as well. So I'm going to click on pick surface and then select this group. So now you can see that the grass is being added to the border of this group. Also, I'm going to increase the density a little bit and then click on generate. So I hope scatter's starting to make sense for you all. So scattered object is basically the objects you want to scatter on a group or on a host. And the host is simply a group or a surface which is going to contain these scattered objects. Alright, so I'm going to close this, go to field of view, 20, and then click on render with Vray Interactive. Now you don't have to worry about the lighting since it's a little too dark. We're going to fix that later in the course by using some artificial lights. Alright, so now you can see that the borders also get filled up. Perfect. Now let's stop the render. Now comes the magic where we're going to scatter these objects onto the terrain. So this time I'm going to create a fresh composition. So click on Composition Manager and then click on the plus button to create a new composition. I'm going to call this Random Objects on Terrain and then start adding in our scattered objects. So I'm going to click on the plus button here, select our boulder limestone, select our small flower here, then select the grass object, the Mexican feather grass, and the blue feces. So now we have the different scattered objects. Now we need to select the host. So click on pick surface and select the host. So now you can see that it starts to scatter all these objects on the terrain. So now we have the option to mix and match these objects. So if I scroll down, we have an option called random scale. So if I switch this on, you can see that the objects would scale from a value of 80% to all the way to 120%. Now I don't need the objects to go bigger, but I would want the objects to become smaller. So maybe from 40% to about 100%. I also have an option to randomly rotate these objects. So I'm going to click on random rotation. So now you can see that all the objects would randomly rotate. And finally, the main cool feature is to simply increase the probability of some objects on the terrain and reduce the probability of others. So if I go to my boulder limestone, which is blue, so all these blue boxes here simply indicates the position of our boulder limestone. I can reduce the scale of this, so maybe keep it at 50%, so you can see that the blue boxes become smaller. You can also increase the scale if you want. You can also increase the probability of these boulder objects. So now if I reduce it, you can see that it goes away and it's scattered only in some areas of the terrain. Similarly, I can do it for the grass as well. So if I click on this, these green boxes is the grass. So I can reduce the size of the grass and the probability of the grass as well showing up on the terrain. So this is where the grass would show up. Similarly, the other big grass, which is in black in color, so these ones, can reduce the scale and keep it at a probability of around 80. So once you've done doing all of that, then you can click on generate. Make sure it is in render only mode. You can go ahead and generate it in the model, but it would make your model heavy. So make sure it's in only render only mode and then click on generate. So now if I go to my front view, Do not worry if you close like a scatter and these objects go away, because it would show up in your interactive render. So now if I click on render with Vray Interactive, you can see the scattered objects in our scene, and this makes it look even more awesome and realistic. How cool is that? So that is a quick tutorial into using Skatter. There's a lot more options that Skatter has, and I will be exploring Skatter in detail in another workshop. In the next video, I will be adding some artificial lights because our exterior seems a little too dull, and I will try using artificial lights to sort of brighten it up. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to add some entourage in our scene using the Chaos Cosmos assets. So open the exercise file for this lesson and then open Chaos Cosmos. So first thing what I'm going to do is add some cars or vehicles in our scene. So go to vehicles. So you guys can go ahead and add any vehicle. Now there's one personal favorite of mine, which is the Porsche. So I'm going to download the model and then click on import. So once you click on import, it would shift to the SketchUp view, and then you can place your model in the scene. So I'm going to place it on the road. Select the model and then rotate it using the rotate tool. Rotate by 90 and then place it close to the roadside curb. Now I'm also going to zoom in and make sure the tire is touching the road. So I'm going to select this end point of the tire and snap it to the blue axis, and then use the road as the reference to align the wheels to the road. Now if I go to FOV 20, you can see that the car is outside the scene, so I'll have to move it in. And that looks perfect. Now we can add some trees. So let's go to Chaos Cosmos again. Go to vegetation and then go to trees. So you can use any tree that you like. Now there's some good ones that I like to experiment with and also be creative with. So I'm going to use this Chinese magnolia because it would become as a focal point in the render. So I'm going to download this tree and then click on import and then place it in the front of the lawn. I'm also going to move it out. Select the tree and move it out a bit. Right, that looks good. I also need to place some additional landscape elements on the lawn here. So let's go to Chaos Cosmos again. And let's go to flowers, grass and rocks. So now we can start placing in some of these plants here. So click on download and place it here. Maybe this Mexican feather grass as well. Some blue fesu, smaller ones. And this. See what else can we place. Maybe some rocks as well. So let's use this boulder limestone here and place it in place. Now we're going to use another plugin in the next video, which is called Skatter 2, to scatter these objects around the lawn and also to play with the size and the scale of these objects. So what I'll do is just move it to the side for now and then place it in the next video. So now let's go back to front view. I'm happy with these minimal entourage assets that I've added to the scene. You guys can go ahead and go crazy and also add some additional trees, plants and more. Maybe in the front here, it's because it's looking a little too plain. So you can maybe add some plants here and whatever you like. So let's go to field of view 20 and then click on render interactive. Alright, scene is looking nice with our car here, the tree here, the background, and this beautiful looking sky at the back. In the next video, I'll show you how to add some 3D grass and also scatter those objects which we've just added from Chaos Cosmos onto this lawn here. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add some artificial lights and make these areas of the render look better or brighter. So to start off, I'm going to place some street lights. So for the street lights, I'm going to use the rectangular lights. So click on rectangular light and place one here. I'm going to move it up. So I'm using the wall as the reference here because it's easier. And I'm also going to rotate it by 180. Now I'm going to go to my top view and then move it in place just so that it is highlighting the areas where it shows up in the render. I'm going to make a copy this way and multiply by 2. So we have 3 artificial lights with the same settings, and I'm also going to make this a group. So let's copy this and place it here so that it brightens the footpath and the artificial grass. And I'm also going to place some lights here so that it brightens this area of the grass as well. So I'm going to go back to my top view. I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to enter this group, delete these 2 lights, and I'm going to make this unique. So enter this group, select the rectangular light and click on make unique. Now I'm going to make a copy this way. So we have 2 lights there, which is going to brighten up the landscape part of our scene. So we have enough lights to brighten up the scene. Now we need to adjust the settings for these lights. So let's go to our asset editor, go to lights. So the rectangular light one is our street light. So I'm going to rename this. And I'm also going to go to options, make sure the source is invisible. So click on invisible. And I'm going to change the directionality so that the light doesn't get scattered away at the top and it is thrown on the road correctly. Similarly for the landscape light as well. So rename this. So once you make a light unique, it would duplicate with the same name and add a number to the end. So in this case, we know that this is our landscape light. So let's change this to landscape light. And then similarly, make sure this is invisible and increase the directionality. All right, now let's test these lights out and see what kind of an impact it has on the scene. So let's go to field of view and then click on render with Vray Interactive. All right, so now you can see that our grass has become brighter and it's brightened up the road as well. We can change the color of these artificial lights if you like. If you go to source Lightmix, you can see that each of these lights come as individual lights. Now that's not what I want. I want them to come as an instance. So I'm going to stop the render. I'm going to change the Lightmix settings. Go to asset editor, go to your render elements here, select the Lightmix and change the group from individual lights to group by instances. So now if I run an interactive render and if I go to my source Lightmix, you can see that they all come as one light. So now you can adjust the value of these lights. So for example, the street light, if I make it warmer, that would make the front of the render warmer as well. And I can also increase the intensity. So let's say 5. So that would make the entire road brighten up, which looks really cool as well. And the landscape light looks cool. So if I switch that off, it just adds that little bit of brightness on the landscape. So let me change this to 3, maybe. 3 is a little too much, so let's keep it at 1. And let's leave it at the default value. Alright, I'm liking this. Now what I'll do is also add some lights for the tree here and some interior lights. So let's stop the render. Let's add this to the S3 VFP. And minimize this. Now we need to add some interior lights and also some lights here. So what I do is again go to our rectangular light, place a rectangular light here. Now I'm going to make this a circular light. So go to your asset editor, go to lights, and this is the new rectangular light which we placed. Right click, rename this, call this tree light, and change the shape from rectangle to disc. Now also go to options and switch this on to make sure it is invisible. Increase the directionality. Now we can increase the size of this by using the scale tool and also rotating it along the red axis. So now it would throw some light on this wall, which would make it look really cool as well. So maybe just move it out a bit so that maybe some shadows of the tree fall on the wall. Just trying to be a little creative with our scene. Finally, we need to place some interior lights. So I'm going to place a sphere light here. So let's click on the sphere light and place it here. Also select the light and move it up. So that's one sphere light. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to make a copy of this. Select these two sphere lights, make it a group, and now enter the group. Now it's easier to edit. If I press J, you can see that easier to control them. So I'm going to move this to the staircase area. So let's move this to the right, to the left, press J. Right, so I have to move this to the staircase area there. You can also use the X-ray mode, which is Y. So this is why it helps in working in groups or by using tags as well. Luckily in this model, they have assigned the roof to a tag called roof. So if you switch this off, you can switch off the roof, and then it's easier to place the sphere light. So I'm going to place it close to the bedroom and also reduce the size of this second light and bring it down so that's not seen from the window. Alright, that should suffice. And also copy this rectangular light down and place it inside this room. Let me just check if it's placed in perfectly. Alright, that should work fine. You can notice that I am using the arrow keys and the shift key on my keyboard. This helps in aligning the lights and placing it in the correct areas. Alright, so I placed the 3 interior lights. Now I need to adjust the settings. So what I'll do is go to my asset editor. So all the 3 lights come with one setting, which is not ideal. So I'll just make this sphere light unique. The other 2 lights can be of the same setting. So select this light, enter the group, select the light, and right click and click on make unique. So as soon as you make unique, that will create the duplicate of the light with a number at the end. So this is the first floor, so rename this. So call this top floor or the first floor light. And this would be the bottom floor light. So rename this, call this bottom floor light. We can leave the settings of these lights as is and then adjust it in the Lightmix. Alright, so once you changed it, just go to options, make sure it is invisible. Similarly, this light as well. Now we can go to our front view and then adjust our lights in the Lightmix settings. So let's run an interactive render. Let's go to our source Lightmix. Just give it a bit for the lights to update. And now we can start adjusting our lights. So the bottom floor light is this. So maybe keep it around 10. So now you can see that this light brightens up here. You can also change the temperature of the light. 10 seems a bit too much, so let's keep it at 5. Now the top floor light, so let's keep this at 10. So you can see that brightens up there. Change the intensity as well. Maybe 20. I wonder why the side light is not showing up. So we need to check that. So this looks good. Let me just add this to the H3VFB. You can also see this backlight here, which is our circular light or our tree light. So maybe you can change this to 10 or maybe even 5 and change the light value. So you can see that that gives a nice cool effect on the wall. You can do that for these walls as well, but I just want to be minimal in the scene. And then add this to the H3VFB. Now this looks good as is. Let me just check that one sphere light on the left there, whether it's overlapping or inside any face. Oh, as you can see, I forgot to move it. I forgot to copy it. I'd rather move the sphere light. So I'm going to select the sphere light, enter the group, select the sphere light, and then place it here, and then move it up. Alright, so we have 2 lights with the same settings, and it's an instance. So now let's go back to front view, and then click on render with Vray Interactive. Give it a bit for the Lightmix settings to adjust. And now we can see the lights coming from here and the back as well. Maybe just increase the top floor light, make it more darker. Keep it around 30 maybe. Now if the interior lights is not as bright as you want it to be, we can also adjust it later using the composite in the V-Ray frame buffer. I will be showing that towards the end of the course. Alright, so this is looking good. Let me just switch off the background. This is pretty good for Instagram as well, but I can make it look even more better by adding some reflections on the window and then using some render elements to maybe increase the lighting inside and sort of adjust the lights here and make the render look much better. So we're coming towards the end of the workshop. I hope you guys are finding it useful. I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'll show you how to add reflections for our windows. So to start off, I'm going to check the glass material. So I'm going to use the bucket tool and select the glass material. So let's go to Asset Editor. So this is our glass material. We can change the color to black. Increase the reflection color to full. Go to refraction and increase the refraction color to full as well. Now if your glass is a thin wall, you can switch on thin wall and that would add additional reflections to your materials. So this is a new feature in the latest update of Vray. Alright, so we've tweaked the glass material. Now let's check the glass material. So let me just enter this group. So you can see that it is a single pane. So what I'll do is select these faces, make it a group, enter the group, press J to toggle visibility. And then I'm going to give a thickness of around 5 mm. It's always a good idea to give some amount of thickness to your glass material. Alright, great. Now here's the magic where we're going to add some reflections to this glass. So obviously materials need to reflect something, right? And in the opposite side of this glass, we do not have anything to reflect apart from our dome light. So what we need to do is add an image at the back of this glass. So I'm going to draw a rectangle on the green axis this way and also make it a group and also move it so that it is aligned right on top. Maybe move it down a bit and also move it so that it is facing the window. Alright, great. And now we need to apply an image on our group here. So to apply an image as a texture, enter this group first, select the face, then go to File, Import, change the format to JPEG. Select this JPEG image which I got from Unsplash, which is a free website to get copyright free images, and then make sure to use the image as a texture and then click on import. So once you import the image, you can then place it on the object and then it would tile. Also make sure, let me just zoom out and then maybe position this way. It's also a good idea to check the scale of the image. So if I measure this, it is around 13 feet, which is a little too much. So let me just bring it down a bit. Right click, done. And now if I measure this, it's around 12 feet. Need to bring it down a bit more. And 11 feet should be fine, which is an ideal height for a image. It's also a good idea to apply this image on the back side of the face. So select this image, enter the group and apply it on the back side. Make sure you're sampling this same image here and applying it at the back so that the tiling is correct. So now here comes the magic. So let me go to Asset Editor. So this is our image here. So now we need to add something called Raytrace properties. So if you click on add attributes, you have something called Raytrace properties. So click on that. And if I open this, we have an option to disable this image to the camera and also disable the cast shadows. So I'm going to disable that, which is visible to camera and also cast shadows. So that's the only settings which you need to update. And also if you like this background, you want to use it in the future, you can add it to your backgrounds here. So now we can test this out. So let's go to our front view again and then run an interactive render. You could see a bit amount of reflection. Let me just switch off the interior light. So you can see the reflection on the glass. What I'll do is maybe move the image a bit up. So I'll have to lock the camera orientation so that it doesn't affect the scene. And then I'm going to select this group, then move it up a bit. Move to the side as well. So you can see the tree and some amount of reflections coming on the glass. Maybe just move it down a bit. What I can also do is maybe add some trees from the Chaos Cosmos library. So if I go to Chaos Cosmos, go to trees, I can add these big trees into our scene. So maybe this banyan tree and place it somewhere here. Make sure it's right in front of the glass, but not overlapping with the camera, of course. Maybe not the banyan tree. Let me check if there's any other tree which I can use. Just try this ash tree here. I will need to place it right in front of the window for it to reflect. I like how this tree is sort of sitting on the left here on the top. So what I'll do is just move it up a bit and then move it to the left. Right, so the reflection is looking good, but I could increase the reflection a bit more. So what I'll do is, let me just stop the render, open this, then enter this group. Now I'm going to select this glass pane, and I'm simply going to make it a double glass pane. So there is double refraction, and that would increase the number of reflections as well. So if you have two glasses with a thickness, that would increase the reflection of the glasses. Also, what I will have to do is go to the materials and then switch off thin wall, because now it is not any more thin and it has a thickness and it is also double glass. So now if I go to my front view, you can see that our tree is sitting right at the top left of the frame, which is perfect for our scene. You can also go ahead and add maybe an additional plant or a tree here, just to sort of get an effect if you like. I may even remove it if it's interfering too much with the composition of the frame. So let's run an interactive render again. You can also go ahead and select part of the render. So it's called region render. So if you select the region render and select only the glass, it would render only the glass, and that would speed up your render workflow as well. So let me just move this to the right here and then lock the camera orientation. And one last thing, what I'll do is maybe just enter this group, make it slightly bigger. Let's see how that affects the scene. Alright, great. So now you can see the reflections in the window. I can also switch on the interior lights. It sort of reduces the reflection, so maybe keep it around 10. And now you can see a little bit of reflection, which is nice. So you can either use an image to add reflection to your window, simply place the image opposite the window and add the Raytrace properties. Or you can also add some Chaos Cosmos trees, which will reflect on the windows. So now you can see how much of an effect adding reflections on the windows has on your scene, and adds that extra bit of realism as well. So I hope you guys found this video useful. In the next video, we'll set up our scene for our final render, add some render elements, and then do some post-production in the Vray frame buffer. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we'll do the final render and also some post-production in the Vray frame buffer. So before we do our final render, I'm just going to add some additional render elements. So let's go to Asset Editor, go to Render Elements, right click, and add Cryptomat. And once you add the Cryptomat, also change the ID type from object name to material name, so that each material has a color applied. And then you can go ahead and also add, for example, reflection, specular, refraction if required, and multi-matte materials as well. Now we don't generally need multi-matte because we've applied Cryptomat, which will randomly generate colors to your different materials in the scene and help in the post-production process. Alright, now we need to set up for the final render. So go to Settings, switch off Interactive, and switch off Progressive as well, which will switch to the bucket render mode. Change quality to high or high plus. I'm going to keep it to high. You can leave update effects at the end so that it shows up towards the end, and change the denoiser to V-Ray. The rest of the settings can be as is. So the camera can be as is. The render output can be 2000 by 2000. And we can save these final settings out as well. So click on save and call this final render setting. So we've added our render elements and also set up the final render settings. So before we render, let's save. So file save. Click on field of view 20 just to make sure you're on the right scene, and then click on the render button. So now it's going to start rendering the image pixel by pixel from the top left all the way depending on the scene. So I'll see you guys in a bit once the render is done. Alright guys, so the render is done and let's check how long it took. So if you go to my stamp tool, you can see that it took about 9 minutes 25 seconds to render the scene, which is decent for an exterior scene. Now let's add some additional post-production before we do some composite work. So we've added the basic stuff, which is the curves exposure. There's one cool layer which you can add, which is called the LUT layer or the lookup table layer. So let's add the lookup table layer. And now you can load in any LUT file which you use or which most photographers use for their Instagram photos. So let's open the LUT file. So I'm going to use this LUT file called db5, which is my personal collection, and then click on open. So you can see the effect it has on the scene right away. You can also change the blending mode. So from, for example, override, we can change it to, for example, screen. So that would make the entire scene brighter. And I can also reduce the opacity of the blend. So if I reduce it, you can see maybe at 0.3, that would just add a little more brightness to our scene, which looks nice. Now, the latest version also comes with something called the sharpen blur, which I showed in the start. So you can increase the sharpness amount. Don't go haywire with it, just a little bit. And I can also enable lens effect. So let's enable lens effect and increase the size and the intensity of our lens. Now the lens effect will only be more pronounced if you have a source light inside the house. Now since we do not have a source light, it wouldn't make much of a difference, but it still helps in adding little extra pop in your scene. Alright, so we've added the basic stuff. Now the lookup table seems a little too bright, so I'm going to switch it off for now, or maybe just reduce the amount a bit more. Maybe keep it around 10%, just a little touch. Alright, so now I can composite this image in the V-Ray frame buffer. So let's go to Lightmix and then click on to composite, or you can also select composite here. So let's click on to composite. So now it would move all these render elements and the lights to a folder called Lightmix. So let's say you want to adjust the top flow light. So I'm going to select the top flow light. And then what I'll do is I'll right click, click on new layer, and then click on curves. So this curves layer will only be applied to the top flow light. And then what I can do is I can select the top right and sort of drag it out. So you can see that that increases the lighting inside the bedroom. How cool is that? I can also go to the top flow light and maybe increase the amount here. So that would increase the lighting in our interior scene as well. So maybe let's keep it around 7. That should be fine. And we can also change the curve from, say, for override to, say, screen, and that would increase the brightness as well. So that's pretty cool. Now let's say you want to change the color of the tile material for whatever reason. What you can do is you can first add a folder. So I'm going to add a folder. I'm going to move it out a bit. And then I'm going to select the folder and I'm going to add a cryptomat mask. So with the cryptomat mask, I can select this material. So you need to click on the pick material and then select the brick wall white. So this is the green or the brick wall white. So if I show, you can see that only the brick wall white would get selected. And now you can change the color of this. So to change it, what you can do is simply right click, go to new layer and click on hue saturation. Now if I change the hue, you can see that the hue changes. You can also decrease the saturation of the brick so that it is sort of whitish, or you can also increase the saturation. You can also increase the lightness, make it darker if you like, just to add that cool effect. So now this would add some depth in your scene as well. You can also right click on the folder, go to new layer and click on color balance. And then sort of change the color this way as well if you like. And then you can switch off and switch on these values and see what kind of an impact it has in your scene. Finally, you can also add additional layers. So for example, if I add a curves layer, now this is going to be added here. So I just need to move it on top. And then on this curves layer, I can right click, go to new layer and then click on Crypto Matte Mask. And now I can select the window. So click on pick and select the window. And you can also show the preview. So the window is selected. And then you can go back to properties. And similarly, how I adjusted the property of the window glass, you can do it this way as well. So select the bottom left and make a drag selection to sort of increase the contrast of the glass. You can also reduce the opacity. So it works similar to Photoshop. I can do the same for the ground as well. So if I click on an exposure layer this time, I can right click on the exposure layer, go to new layer, Crypto Matte Mask, click on pick and select the ground. So now you can see the scatter grass gets selected. And go to properties and reduce the highlight burns and reduce the exposure to make it dark, or increase the exposure to make it brighter. Can increase the contrast as well. So how cool is that? You can do the entire post-production within the V-Ray frame buffer using layers. Now finally, what I'll do is save these layers stacks out. So click on save and call this final layer tree. So you can load in my settings and see how it affects your scene. To load it in, you can simply click on load and load this layer preset. You can also play with different layer presets. So we have something called the layer presets folder. So to enable this folder, I'm going to go to options, VFP settings, go to layers and then load in a presets folder. So I've created a folder called presets and click on select folder, click on save and close. So now I can save this settings out to that presets folder. So click on save and go to the presets folder, call this final preset. So now if I click on the preset icon, you can see that we have final preset and we also have initial color correction, which is the first form without any sort of light. You can also use the render elements for your post-production. So to add a render element, what you need to do is first add a folder. So I'm going to add a folder. Make sure this folder is outside the main composite. And then what I'll do is right click on the folder, go to new layer and click on render element. So this would add an RGB color for the entire render, which is not what I want. So I'm going to change the render element to reflection. And I'm going to add the reflection render element only to the glass. So to do that, right click on the reflection layer, go to new layer and click on Crypto Matte Mask. And then simply pick the glass material. So now you can see that that would automatically increase the reflection in your V-Ray frame buffer scene. Similarly, I can also right click on the new folder, go to new layer, click on render element, change this to refraction, and then again right click, go to new layer, click on Crypto Matte Mask, and then pick the glass material. So now you can see that our glass material looks much better. So if I switch this off, you can see how much of an effect the render element has on the glass material. So that is a quick tutorial into post-producing within the V-Ray frame buffer. As you can see, we do not have to use Photoshop anymore because V-Ray frame buffer has all the capabilities, if not more, to do awesome post-production within it. And one last thing, what we need to do is save this out. So click on save, call this the final render, and click on save. Alright, so this is the final render that we were able to create, which we can then go ahead and upload on Instagram and get awesome number of likes. I hope you guys found this workshop useful. Please do share your work in the class assignment and also do share it on social media and tag us, which is Sketchup Guru Official. I'll see you guys in the future workshops and classes. Take care. This is your host, Manish Paul Simon, signing off. Cheers.